Oh, hello everyone. And today I'm going to be looking at something that has interested me for many years. There's a website called TV Tropes, and on that website, with extraordinary detail, they've broken down many different character archetypes and typical roles that you see on television. So in this video, I want to compress a lot of that information into basically how do we break down a TV team like the A-Team or the Scooby-Doo team, or even in movies like the Star Wars crew, Thundercats, you name it, Ghostbusters. We're going to be looking at how you actually go about breaking these down. Now, first of all, the big unit is called the team. Now, there are different types of teams. You can have a four-man ensemble. You can have a five-man band. You can have the Magnificent Seven Samurai, where there's seven in the crew, like Scooby-Doo, for example, has got... No, Scooby-Doo's got six, I think. Thundercats have got seven, if you count Snarf. So, typically you get four. Sometimes you get five, but... it varies, but that unit is called the team. And there are different ways of categorizing the functions, roles, personalities of the various members of the team. So there are four categories. We have temperament, we have personality, we have function, and also secondary functions, which I'll get to. So it's like 4.5 or 5 if you want. And then we have the basic philosophy of the characters. You can have a 4 temperament ensemble, 4 philosophy ensemble, and you pick the various functions and roles around it. So let's start with the temperament, because this one has the most kind of classical literary heritage. I'm a Shakespeare scholar originally, and these are the basic temperaments that you find in Shakespeare's plays. The Elizabethan playwrights used them based on what the Roman playwrights were doing. They all read Seneca, who was a famous Roman playwright, who, of course, ultimately was taking it from the Greeks. A lot of the kind of physiological stuff goes back to a chap called Galen, but we don't really need to get into that. Basically, these are called the 4 humors, and the idea is that you have certain things going around your body which give you a certain temperament. Now, obviously, the biology behind it could be a load of old bunk, but still, these are very recognizable characters. And I actually think that even though there is no, Neil deGrasse Tyson or somebody like that would sneer at these as scientific categories, I actually think they have quite a lot of explanatory power. I spent quite a lot of time going through people I know, and each one of them fits pretty neatly into one of these 4 basic buckets. And of course, when you start looking at it, you then start thinking, well, which one of these do I fit into? And I actually came to the conclusion that I oscillate between melancholic and choleric. But anyway, starting clockwise, then we have the phlegmatic man, or the phlegmatic person, if you want to be PC, who is calm, even-tempered, controlled, thoughtful, reliable, peaceful, careful, and passive. Phlegmatic characters, I mean, classically, they tended to be more feminine, although you can get male phlegmatic characters too. A bit more easygoing, tend to keep their cool in many different situations. A lot of good characters are phlegmatic, but they're also a little bit passive too, not that headstrong, Then over on the right, you can see the sanguine character, blood. This person is sociable, outgoing, responsive, talkative, easygoing, lively, carefree, and a leader. And this is a kind of sunny disposition, if you want, life and soul of the party, someone who's generally kind of quite positive. I think of this person as, that Beatles song, Here Comes the Sun, the George Harrison one. It's kind of going along. Hello, Mr. Jones, like you're kind of waving to everybody. It's quite smiley. And I don't know what it is. People seem to naturally have these sorts of characters in real life too. My daughter, for example, just seems to be like a natural 20 role sanguine. She easily fits into this sanguine bucket. Then if you just carry on going around, you get the well, if you go from left to right, we've got the melancholic character in the bottom left, who is moody, anxious, rigid, sober, pessimistic, quiet, reserved, and unsociable. I do think this graphic here is a little bit negative towards these latter two, because they do have positive qualities as well, which we'll get onto. Like the melancholic characters tend to be more contemplative, they tend to be more analytical, they tend to be less prone to large shows of kind of overt emotion, introverted, etc. And then over on the right hand side, we've got the choleric character, who's a bit touchy, restless, maybe a bit hot-headed, aggressive, very masculine. And in the classical sense, a lot of the masculine heroes actually were choleric characters. I remember in Shakespeare's history plays, for example, Hotspur was a choleric character, ready to rough and tumble, so these are the four basic archetypes. And funny enough, I've got a picture of the Ghostbusters there, and pretty much most four-man teams fit into this. So, I mean, clearly Peter Venkman is a choleric character, bit touchy, can be aggressive. He's snarky, as we'll get to. Venkman is cooler, more analytical. He'd be melancholic. Ray is choleric. Is sanguine. He's top right. He's the more fun-loving, the party one. And Winston, more laid back, bit more passive, bit more of a generic character in the background. He is phlegmatic. So there's your basic four temperament ensemble. But you can pick any other four-man set and do the same thing. Turtles, for example, who have we got? Well, I think Michelangelo is the sanguine character. He's the more fun-loving one. The Raphael is choleric, more of a temper, more snarky. Donatello is much like Egon Spengler there, is the melancholic character. And you see, melancholic doesn't necessarily mean bad. Egon and Donatello are great characters, right? They're just more quiet, they're more analytical. And up in the top left, phlegmatic, well, phlegmatic characters can seem like they're a bit more boring because they're kind of a bit more laid back or whatever. Leonardo is clearly the phlegmatic character in Turtles, and you can pick your own kind of four-man bands and do this with them. Then we have the personality. Now, there are more of these. So, and this is one of those things that is kind of interesting because this is quite a deep system. You can have the same basic archetype, like a choleric character, for example, but they could buddy up with different personalities. Or you can take a basic personality type and you can buddy them up with a different temperament. One of the fascinating things I found reading TV tropes is that each one of the four Blackadder characters, so that's the first Blackadder, the second one, the Elizabethan one, the third Blackadder, and then Blackadder goes fourth, have a different archetype, right? I think Blackadder goes fourth when he's in World War One. He's melancholic. The one in the Regency era is choleric. The one in the Elizabethan era is sanguine, and the first one that we see, who's kind of more wormy and so on, is phlegmatic. And yet each one of them, with the possible exception of the first one, is still a deadpan snarker, right? So Blackadder actually gives you three different temperaments of deadpan snarker. Deadpan snarker typically goes with the choleric character, but you can get a melancholic one as well, depending on the circumstances. So let's just go through these really quickly. You get, this is not on TV tropes, but I'm just calling it boring good. Like I was talking about Leonardo as the leader of Turtles, the ace, the ideal hero, the standardized leader, the generic guy. Depending on where he fits into the team, the boring good tends to be your bog standard hero. In Star Wars, which I've got pictured here, your boring good is Luke Skywalker. Bog standard, boring good hero. Mario in the Mario games is boring good. Okay. Most heroes, for some reason, are boring, boring good characters. And that can come in different stripes. So you can get the phlegmatic, boring good, like Leonardo or like Winston Zedmore that we just saw, or they can have a bit more spunk, or you can even get ones that are a bit more headstrong, choleric, boring goods, right? Which makes them less boring in a way, and depending on how much you crank that up, it becomes an anti-hero eventually. But generally speaking, the boring good, you'll all recognize this character. Then we've got the lovable rogue, again using Star Wars as the template. Clearly, Han Solo is a lovable rogue. Star Wars has got a fair share of lovable rogues. Who's the other one? Han, old buddy, don't let me down. Lando Calrissian is a lovable rogue as well. You'll recognize lovable rogues wherever you see them. Then we get the emotional bruiser, or just the bruiser. Clearly, Chewie is an emotional bruiser. What emotional bruiser means basically is that you get this big tough guy, but he's got a heart of gold, right? B.A. Baracus from A-Team, archetypical emotional bruiser, big tough guy, but he's got a heart of gold. Doesn't let his guard down that often, but occasionally, he's the first one to be there to hug you type thing. Chewie is clearly that. Hot-blooded clearly goes with the choleric temperament very well. Princess Leia is hot-blooded. We get the deadpan snarker. Star Wars crew is notable in so much as both Han Solo and Leia are deadpan snarkers. Lots of deadpan snarkery in Star Wars. But it's your Daria. Daria is a melancholic deadpan snarker. Peter Venkman is a choleric deadpan snarker. I mean, there's so many deadpan snarkers. In Turtles, the deadpan snarker is Raphael, of course, who's another choleric deadpan snarker. Typically, if they're a bigger character, the deadpan snarker will be of the choleric archetype. But like I said, you can push it the other way, and Daria is a melancholic type. Daria is more towards emo, right? Whereas Peter Venkman or Blackadder in the Regency period, more spiky character, more kind of, a bit more insufferable, whereas Daria is a bit more resigned. And Bill Murray, who is the king of the deadpan snarkers, actually pushes around the archetypes depending on the period of his career. Early on, he tends to play choleric deadpan snarkers. Bill Murray in Scrooged, Bill Murray in Ghostbusters, Bill Murray in Groundhog Day, all choleric deadpan snarkers. Whereas later in his career, Broken Flowers, for example, all of those films, Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, Royal Tenenbaum, any film he did with Wes Anderson, basically, he's a more melancholic deadpan snarker. What was that one? Lost in Translation. He's melancholic, right? He's older. He's a bit sadder, still a deadpan snarker, though. Sixth different personality type here is the big fun. We've already encountered one big fun. Ray Stantz in Ghostbusters is the big fun. He's more cuddly. He's more lovable. He's the party dude, like Michelangelo. He's he's always up for the crack. The big fun. You get the TV genius. TV genius is basically someone who's really smart. They know everything. I mean, there are too many examples to count, really. So, like off the wall TV geniuses would be people like Sherlock Holmes or Doctor Who or somebody like that, who they just know absolutely everything, right? But you can have lesser variants of it. Again, we've encountered two already: Donatello in Turtles, Egon Spengler. These are TV geniuses. The Cloud Cuckoo Lander is a character who's basically a little bit mad. He's a little bit crazy. He's a little bit zany, and he knows it, but he leans into it. Cosmo Kramer in Seinfeld, um, Howling Mad Murdoch in A-Team, Cloud Cuckoo Lander. Then you get the Jerkass, who's a character who's basically a jerk and knows it. And again, you can actually, some of those Bill Murray characters I just mentioned, certainly in Groundhog Day, he's also a jerkass, and that can be dialed up or dialed down. Obviously, if it's pushed too far, it can become a villainous archetype. The jerkass is typically a good guy, but he has to kind of learn some sort of lesson, and then he kind of becomes a reformed jerkass or whatever. Arguably, a lot of the characters in Star Wars have jerkass levels as well. 10, we have the control freak, typically female, actually, like a bossy character. Off the top of my head, Dottie in Raggy Dolls, which is a bit of an obscure reference, is an archetypical control freak. Monica in Friends was a control freak. There's a few others. Speaking of Star Wars, that blue purple haired one in the Disney Star Wars was a bit of a control freak. You can get male versions of it. I can't think of it off the top of my head. Prospero in Shakespeare's The Tempest is a classic control freak. But anyway, and then we have the Ditz, who's basically any character who's a bit of a bimbo. In fact, Friends has got like a couple of these. Rachel in the early part of Friends is a Ditz, and Joey is a male Ditz in Friends. And then we have the Old Master, which is your basic mentor type character, Mr. Miyagi, Splinter in the Turtles, any old mentor, basically Yoda. And the Old Master is a seldom actually part of the team, but they may go on bits of the journey with them, right? So you take these four and you add Yoda, it becomes a 5-man band, and Old Master's part of the team. Typically, though, they're more of a quest giver, or they could be dying at the start or something, but they're usually a quest giver rather than part of the actual team, but they can be part of the team is the point. And in various, this is a trope, especially in classic martial arts movies, where the Old Master, rolls up his sleeves and he has one last fight or something. So it's you do get periods where Old Master comes into the team. Next, we will go on to the function. Now, these are the 7 functions of what is known as the Magnificent 7 Samurai, which is a 7-man team. But it can be a 4-man band, just those 4 at the top, or a 5-man band, which is any 4 of these plus one of the other 3. Now, some of these need a little bit of explanation. The hero is straightforward. That's typically your generic good character, your boring good, your ace, your Luke Skywalker, Leonardo. It's Lion-O, it's He-Man, the hero, right? But very often there's a Lancer as well. And the Lancer is basically the foil to the hero, the person who the hero bounces off, the person, like if the hero is a generic good guy, Lancer's probably going to be a deadpan snarker, right? If the hero is happy-go-lucky, the Lancer's going to be a bit more cynical and world-weary. And you see this dynamic over and over and over again in cartoons, TV shows, action movies, hero and Lancer. Most obvious one, of course, Luke Skywalker, Han Solo. Han Solo is, when you look up Lancer, it should just be a picture of Han Solo, not the main hero, but the foil to the hero. In X-Men, it's, in the old X-Men, it was Cyclops was the hero and Wolverine was the Lancer, right? In other times, they've actually switched that round and made Wolverine like an anti-hero, like the lead, in which case somebody like Cyclops becomes the Lancer. And this dynamic plays out in so many areas. You can have a situation where you have a hero who has a sidekick who then graduates to becoming a Lancer. That happens in Batman. If you read the Batman comics, when Robin becomes what's his name, Nightwing, and he graduates, he becomes a kind of Lancer to Batman if they team up, if they form the team for that story. That's the dynamic between them. And then the four-man team is rounded out by the big guy and the smart guy. Okay. Now we've met a number of smart guys already. Egon Spengler in Ghostbusters, Donatello. It's Spock in Star Wars, Star Trek. Smart guy, right? He brings technical wizardry to the table. He's probably handy fixing things. He's book smart. He knows a lot. He brings technical expertise to the dance. Very often, the smart guy will also be on that melancholic archetype where he's a bit socially introverted, a bit quieter. You know, you've seen these characters hundreds of times. And then the big guy, who comes in different forms as well. You can get a gentle giant variant. You can get the emotional bruiser, who I mentioned. Big guys tend to be quite quiet as well in many cases. Big guy can also have other skills, like they can fix machines and things. This is the case in the A-Team. The big guy in the A-Team is B.A. Baracus, Mr. T. But Mr. T was also a dab hand with a spanner. He could make anything with a spanner. Give Mr. T some sellotape, a spanner, and an old plank of wood, and he'll make you a tank or something, right? And another exact same character like this was Panthro in Thundercats. He was a classic big guy, right? So there's your basic four-piece. But then you can add in the old guy. The old guy is basically, you know, Yoda's going to join you for a mission. Mr. Miyagi's along for the ride. You know, it could be that. Or in some cases, like in original Magnificent Seven or whatever, could be a grizzled old vet who's in for the whole, like if it's a 7-man squad for the whole film, he could be there the whole time. But anyway, that when the old guy joins, it can be 5-man like that. Or another common trope is the young guy, who's a bit fresh behind the ears, like wet behind the ears. This was a very common trope in the Carry On films that I covered before. There was always like the brand new recruit. It's a comedy trope a lot to have the young guy. Jim Dale played a lot of these young guy characters in the Carry On films. And you can also get a funny guy as well. Funny how? You can get a funny guy too. But typically it's those 4 plus 1 in a 5, or it'll be just those 4. Sometimes you could get scenarios where the Lancer is also an old guy, the hero is a young guy, or vice versa as well. Like if the hero is Batman and the Lancer is Nightwing, clearly the hero is also kind of an old guy and the Lancer's kind of a young guy as well. You can get different dynamics like that, but those are the basic functions. And then there are secondary functions on top of that. So you can actually you can double up these. Okay, so somebody can be both the hero and also the face. The face is the one who does the talking. In the A-Team, it was Face, who you can see here, right? There's also the Heart, who is a character who is the emotional core of the team spirit, keeps the spirit up, right? In Star Trek, this was Bones, probably, right? Was the Heart. And again, you can buddy these up in different ways. So arguably, in Star Wars, the heart of the Star Wars team is Luke Skywalker, who's also the hero. So he's a hero who's also the heart. Often the heart will be a different character in the ensemble. Sometimes it will be a woman, the heart, right? For the emotional well-being of the team. The face, though, if they're going to meet anybody, I'll do the talking. I'm the charmer. I'm the one who can smooth talk, right? So that's the face. Cunning linguist is basically a translator. C3PO is a cunning linguist, for example, but he's also, what would he be in this ensemble if they joined? Funny guy, I guess. Funny guy, but he's also a cunning linguist. Engineer is the guy who can fix everything. Donatello was a smart guy, but also an engineer. B. Baracus was a big guy, but also an engineer. Panthro in Thundercats was a big guy, but also an engineer. In fact, the big guy engineer crossover team seems like it happens a lot, right? And in some cases, like I just mentioned, who was the? Oh no, in Star Trek, Scotty was the engineer. Obviously, he was a dedicated role, and then of course the medic, Bones being both the heart and the medic. So he's actually got two secondary functions, as well as being part of the main team as well. I should mention that there is a theory that the three characters in Star Trek, that is Kirk, Spock, and Bones, represent the three parts of the Freudian, the id, the ego, and the superego, where Spock is the superego, Bones is the id, and Kirk is the ego, trying to mediate between the two of them. So that dynamic exists on many teams as well. And finally, we have the philosophy of the characters. You can have a 4 philosophy ensemble. The classic one is the cynic, the optimist, the realist, and the apathetic character who just doesn't really care. If it's a 5-man, you can also get the conflicted, somebody who's conflicted between two different points of view. And naturally, different philosophies buddy up easily with different temperaments. So one can easily imagine a melancholic, deadpan snarker who is also a cynic. This is Daria, right? Very rarely will you get a melancholic, deadpan snarker who's also an optimist. It just seems to go well with cynicism or, at worst, realism, right? Trying to think of other characters. I mean, Dana Scully in X-Files seems to come to mind for the idea of being like her role as being a cynic much of the time, right? So yeah, and you can get characters who are, when they say apathetic, they're just along for the ride. They don't really care that much about the mission, etc., etc. This actually comes up in various different times in Star Wars, where there'll be a character who's part of the band who's actually a little bit ambiguous or ambivalent towards the main mission. Han Solo's got a little bit of it, He's like, does he really care about solving the Empire, or is he just in it to collect a bounty or collect a contract or fill off his debts or whatever? He's apathetic about the mission. So and then obviously Luke is an optimist in that crew, etc., etc. So anyway, hopefully that was interesting. You can have hours of fun breaking down different characters in different ways. And I've always just wanted to make a video like this, and now I've done it. So let me know what you make of this, and I'll catch you next week. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe. You can join the channel for thousands of hours of past shows in the archive and hundreds of videos. If you have any questions, you can leave a super chat or a super thanks, and I'll be sure to pick it up during my weekly office hours, which run every Tuesday afternoon. I also provide courses at the academic agency, which I encourage people to buy. Thousands of students now have taken the Trivium to improve their skills in writing, logic, and rhetoric. Just 3 of many courses available. Buy it now. But most importantly of all, friends, get out.